I want to get to a very important piece of news lately. If you put in this context, Jacob, of trade war, U.S. China, all the discussions here in Bali. Bloomberg News learned in the last 24 hours that the Treasury Department is probably not going to label China a currency manipulator. What do you think about that particular issue? We've seen yuan weaken dramatically. Are they manipulating their currency? Are there other forces driving the renminbi that are out of their control?
Well, I believe that what we see now in the foreign exchange markets is much more a U.S. dollar story than a Chinese currency story. Of course, an exchange rate is something that links two currencies, and therefore it reflects policies on both sides. But in order to be formally a currency manipulator, there are very strict criteria. You need to have a large current account vis-à-vis the U.S. You need to have a large current account overall. You need to be proven that you are systematically intervening in the markets. It's very difficult to prove, and I do not believe that this is the situation today. You know, in addition to all of that, when do you recall that China was referred to as a currency manipulator or declared to have been? The issue is that it is more of a negotiating instrument. And today, the U.S. plate of dealing with China has so many issues, especially in the trade area, that starting picking another fight really would make no sense. I really think that the U.S., together with Europe, should join hands and basically approach China as a group and deal with the grievances about intellectual property rights, especially in the technology area. And once you do this, it's a much more focused issue rather than fragmented approach, a commodity by commodity, and shooting in all directions.
So is it your view that this escalating trade war is one of the things that's weakened the yuan?
Well, escalating trade war, and I would still call it trade skirmishes, I hope it does not become a war, reduces confidence in the markets. It creates tendency to move towards a safer haven. The U.S. is still the safer haven. It probably contributes to the strengthening of the U.S. currency, which has implications also on other emerging markets. But in more generally, trade war, we should look at history. Whenever there was a trade war, the world suffered. And the world suffered not only the other side of the spectrum, but everyone, including the U.S. Just look at the most, I wouldn't call it most recent, but most dramatic example of the Smoot-Hawley tariff that generated the Great Depression. So let's be careful. A slippery slope, cooperation, integration, and I view what is happening today as part of the general attack on globalization, on cooperation, on international institutions, and I think it's a very dangerous one.
Okay. Federal Reserve, stock market sell-off. The president has linked that stock market sell-off, a bit of a recovery now, nevertheless, to the Fed having a crazy policy of raising interest rates. Who's crazy?
Well, you know, I will not go into the medical diagnostics, but I can say one thing. Number one, the Fed is doing the right thing. The Fed normalization strategy started long ago. It started by already 3-4 years ago when it stopped the expansion of its balance sheet. Then very gradually, pre-announced, interest rates started to go up. Nobody is or was surprised by the rise in interest rates, and nobody therefore should blame it on a dramatic thing. I really think that the reason for the drama in the markets is reflecting much greater concern with the consequences of the trade war. Those consequences are severe. If you have an airplane where the two co-pilots are arguing with each other, what should the passengers do? other than
Okay.
pray and fasten their seatbelts. Of course, it will create a slower pace of investment, it will lower confidence in the economy, and it will create havoc. I think that the Fed is doing the right thing, and I don't believe, by the way,
Okay.
that it is wise or appropriate for the president or any politician to second guess
Okay.
what the Fed is doing, because the Fed is very professional. They have in all the data that you need.
So just another quick question here, though, Jacob. Emerging markets, global risks. What is the biggest risk, do you think, to the global economy right now?
The global economy is now subject, by and large, to geopolitical risks, including, by the way, the trade area. But when you have skirmishes in the industrial world, and in fact, you look at, there is no single area that things are tranquil. Europe has still a problem. The United States has a problem. Brexit is a problem. Japan still is there. The industrial world as a whole, while it is performing much better than it has during the past decade, has a lot of challenges. The emerging markets are on the receiving side. And frankly, they cannot prevent the shocks that are emanated from the rest of the world. However, they can strengthen their own defenses. And what we have learned was, number one, strengthen your financial system. Number two, make sure you have responsible budget policy. And number three, make sure you have functioning, flexible exchange rates. Okay. History shows that those countries that have had those three items have performed much better in the post-crisis era than other countries.